It is well known that Margaret Hamilton, who played the Wicked Witch of the West, suffered first and second-degree burns while performing her own stunt on the Munchkinland set. But this isn't the most serious injury sustained during production.
Margaret Hamilton returned from her injuries suffered on the Munchkinland set. She was almost immediately presented with another stunt that involved fire and smoke.
The very first thing they wanted her to do was get on a broomstick filled with gasoline and be suspended on wires while it shot fire out of the back of it. They handed her the flame-proof suit, and she said, "What is this for?"
There was some back and forth there where they said something about her costume would be have asbestos, and she said, well, if it's a perfectly safe stunt, why is my costume fire treated to be fireproof, right? And they said, well, it was just in case, right? And she says, I have a little boy at home and I can't risk any more accidents. And she said, you make up my double and no one will know the difference.
So it was delegated to her stunt double, Betty Danko.
And then Margaret Hamilton left for the day. When she got home, she received the call that Betty Danko was in the hospital. This is one of the things that doesn't get talked about and is one of the worst accidents that actually took place on the set at The Wizard of Oz, and it happened to Betty Danko.
What this involved was the scene where the witch is skywriting over Emerald City, and to get some close-up shots, they had this broomstick that was lifted by wires about 10 feet off the stage floor. And the effect was to have Betty Danko press a button that would emit smoke to bring about the skywriting effect. Well, they didn't get very far, and the darn contraption exploded and sent Betty Danko flying.
The broom had exploded between her legs, which burned both of her legs very badly. She sustained internal damage. She had a full hysterectomy after this accident, and she had those scars for the rest of her life.
Her career had to end with stunts because she got mauled by a mountain lion in another film later.
Gosh, I remember this.
And then she got hit by a car while waiting for a bus, and that ended everything for her.
Everyone in The Wizard of Oz is lip-syncing, technically. Nobody's saying live on the set, and that was common practice to maintain the quality control.
Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me.
They all pre-recorded their songs, and then they lip-synced over the track they had recorded, but they all sing them live in the studio. An article was published in The Hollywood Reporter titled "Scandal in Oz. Over the Rainbow Plagiarized?" And the article laid out the possibility that Harold Arlen may have heard this tune by a woman who wrote this piece of music in 1910.
There are similarities between Over the Rainbow and this piece of music. But every so often, somebody identifies a piece of music that sounds like Over the Rainbow, the Song to the Moon from Dvorak's Rusalka. The intermezzo from Mascagni's William Radcliffe. Over the Rainbow has, in some ways, some very basic melodic elements to it. It starts with the octave. And that octave that expresses Dorothy's yearning, it's actually used to teach music students what an octave is. So I think that's another example of how pervasive Over the Rainbow is in our ears. And so I think that it's very easy for there to be similar phrases in other pieces of music that are just coincidence.
I don't think there's a case to be made for plagiarism, especially because we have so much information about the process Harold Arlen and Yip Harburg went through to write Over the Rainbow. So I would say that's a no.
the melody of Over the Rainbow. I'll demonstrate for a second. And then I will now play the melody of the etude. So as you can see, there are some 2 or 3 note differences, but it's almost identical. And as a composer myself, I don't think it could be just a subconscious or inspired by. It's just my opinion. Don't want to get anyone in trouble.
It's a twister! It's a twister!
How did the special effects team manage to make such a lifelike tornado?
Would you believe producers actually considered going to Kansas to scout a real tornado? It's true.
They were sort of hoping that maybe it would be tornado season.
One would happen.
One would magically appear.
Ultimately deeming this impractical, MGM special effects wizard A. Arnold Gillespie settled on a 35-foot muslin fabric funnel for the tornado, attached at the top to a rotating crane and at the bottom to a vehicle below the stage. Wind machines and dust were used as the twister tracked behind miniatures of the Kansas farm.
That was filmed, and then it was reprojected onto a screen so that the actors could do their thing in front of it. Very, very ingenious, very realistic.
That image of her coming through the gate, which I'm like, girl, why are you walking towards it? Like that's always a moment too. I'm like, okay, do you not see that? I know we want to get home. It's just so much special effect magic that's still...
It's insane.
It still looks good. I still think it looks amazing.
I'm always amazed when that window flies and hits Dorothy in the back of the head, and she's just like, oh. It's like, some of this stuff looks really dangerous.
Yes.
How did they do this? All the tumbleweeds. Scary.
What were some of the objects that fly by Dorothy's window during the tornado? Well, we see a cow, a couple of men in a rowboat, an old lady in a rocking chair, and some chickens in a chicken coop. Which witch do you see through Dorothy's window during the tornado? It's actually the Wicked Witch of the East.
But how does one know for sure? Well, look closely, and you can see she's wearing the ruby slippers. Gillespie's highly effective tornado was a remarkable special effect for its time. Its impact was so significant that MGM reused footage of the Wizard of Oz tornado for Cabin in the Sky in 1943 and High Barbary in 1947.
It's a tornado!
It is widely acknowledged that The Wizard of Oz was innovative for its time, especially in terms of its special effects. But how were these stunning visuals accomplished? Glinda the Good Witch's arrival in Munchkinland was achieved using an 8-inch silver ball that the camera moved in on to create the illusion of movement. The set and actors were filmed separately and combined as a double exposure, giving the ball a transparent quality. For the argumentative apple trees and those in the haunted forest, 8 of Hollywood's tallest extras wore rubber suits cast from authentic tree bark with face screens, movable branches, and zippers down the back. For the witch's skywriting sequence, a 6-foot square tank filled with milky water was raised above the stage. A hypodermic needle was used to write "Surrender Dorothy" in reverse, so the camera captured it correctly. Fanning the water created the illusion of wind drift, and the final effect was double exposed against a Technicolor blue sky. Next, the foursome encounters the Phantom Wizard of Oz, depicted as an enormous disembodied head. An anonymous actor was filmed against a black velvet background, lip-syncing Frank Morgan's dialogue. This footage was then superimposed with shots of the throne. This eerie effect was achieved by projecting pre-recorded footage of Margaret Hamilton onto a mirror set at a 45-degree angle, relaying the image onto a translucent screen inside the ball. To achieve the witch's melting scene, Hamilton was positioned on a hydraulic elevator that slowly descended beneath the stage floor, while dry ice created a steam effect. Her dress was tacked to the floor, allowing her to slip out of the costume and leave it behind. An oversized witch's hat gave the illusion that her head was shrinking.
the moment that sticks with me forever, it's like a core memory, is the switch from the black and white, the sepia tones, into Technicolor. And just as a kid being like, how did that just happen?
The entire shot for the transition from Kansas into the land of Oz was done one take, one scene in Technicolor, seamless transition. The inside of the farmhouse was painted in sepia tones to match the rest of the Kansas scenes.
And you have this Dorothy who is really Judy Garland's double, wearing a black and white dress. And as the actress portraying Dorothy opens the door, she backs out of the scene, and in comes Judy Garland now, replacing her as Dorothy.
All of a sudden, the door opens and it's in Technicolor. It was so memorable. You're in Oz. Fantastic.
There's a wash of color and sound. The orchestration is just very rich. And the camera pounds around the Munchkinland set. And it's really the first glimpse we get of Oz.
One of the things that we remember when we look back at this film now over an august period of 85 years is how novel it was that this story should be filmed in Technicolor. Everything in Oz was like the M&M factory store, very, very brightly colored.
This is a really important moment because it tells us we've arrived in the place over the rainbow.
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Why did it get so dangerously hot on the set of The Wizard of Oz? Over 100 degrees. Well, it turns out they needed to use really big, bright, hot lights in order to achieve that Technicolor effect. And the Land of Oz isn't the Land of Oz without Technicolor.
So a cinemascape is an abstract representation of an entire film, all captured in a single image that showcases the color palettes used throughout the film. I wrote software that will go frame by frame through a movie and calculate the average color of that frame. I draw each of those colors as a 1-pixel vertical stripe, and then you lay those out end to end and you get this really stunning representation of the entire movie in a single picture. We can start to identify all these iconic scenes in the film based on the color palettes that are used in those scenes. Right here we have a very abrupt visual shift as the movie transitions into Technicolor from the sepia tones. And then we have a really bright yellow strip right here where Dorothy leaves on the yellow brick road. Right about here is where they go into the dark forest to meet the Cowardly Lion, and they finally reach the Emerald City. Obviously, very iconic look in those scenes. It's a very flexible art piece that can be translated to a variety of different mediums.
Dorothy lived in the midst of the great Kansas prairies, wrote L. Frank Baum in the opening to The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. But where exactly in Kansas did she live? While we can only conjecture, there is one town that certainly fits the bill.
Welcome to the Oz Museum here in Wamego, Kansas. We are the only Oz museum in the world that covers the entire history of the Oz phenomenon, and we're so glad that you're here today. Of the many wonderful things that we have here on display is a first print, first edition of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. We are very pleased right now to have the original tornado house from the '39 film. You could actually see the construction and how it was put together, just as a regular house would be.
After visiting the Oz Museum, guests can follow the yellow brick road in downtown Wamego to discover a delightful array of Oz-themed murals painted by local artists. And a visit to this charming little town wouldn't be complete without a stop at the Oz Winery.
Drunken Munchkin is one of our most popular labels. It is our Cabernet Sauvignon, so a popular wine to boot. We've also got Flying Monkey. It is another red wine. And then the Yellow Brick Road is always a fun one as well, too. This image is a classic image. When you think of Wizard of Oz, Yellow Brick Road is one of the first things you think of. Having been born and raised in Kansas, everybody's always like, oh, you know, did a tornado blow you in? Can you click your slippers and go home? People have that association with Kansas.
Has anybody here ever heard the stories about the unruly munchkins? Supposedly, they were drunken, rowdy people, and there was 124 of them staying in the 64-room Culver Hotel.
Welcome to the Culver Hotel. This is where a lot of the Munchkins from the 1939 film would stay, and except for about 3 of them, all of the Munchkins were very well behaved. People love a good story. I mean, you know, it adds to the interest.
The rumors of the Munchkins being rowdy and unruly and being drunk and having orgies, this was a myth that Garland herself helped to propagate. Maybe she was just being funny.
What the Munchkins?
Well,
they're little dwarfs.
Tiny.
Yeah? Were they little kids or were they little men?
They were drunks.
They were little drunks?
As a joke on a Jack Parr interview on television in 1967, she referred to them as little drunks.
They got smashed every night, and they'd pick them up in butterfly nets.
I know Dad told a story about one of the Munchkins who got drunk and fell into the toilet. They were on the set and they were hearing someone screaming. And so a Munchkin fell into the toilet. They rushed him out. He was one of the ones that drank. And so they didn't all drink. Don't get the wrong idea.
You have to remember, this was the era of the 2-martini lunch. Everyone smoked, everyone drank.
And one of the supposed stories is that this one Munchkin got really angry at another one because he had been making eyes at his wife. So he brought in 2 pistols to threaten him. I mean, talk about a short temper.
That was actually the genesis behind an entire motion picture of its own called Under the Rainbow.
Under the Rainbow.
Guess what happened when 150 midgets checked into a hotel in Hollywood to make one of the world's biggest movies?
Was all of the supposed antics by the little people behind the scenes on the set of The Wizard of Oz, which was largely not true, but some of them were rowdy.
Toto did earn more per week than the Munchkins. I believe he earned $125 a week, if I'm not mistaken. And the Munchkins earned $50 a week. They were contracted at $100 a week, but then Leo Singer, who hired all of them and acted as their de facto agent, took $50 off the top of their salary every week. So they got $50 a week. When you adjust that for inflation, they were still paid a very fair wage, and they were in one scene, don't forget. Toto, and let's clarify, Toto was not paid anything. Toto's a dog. It was Carl Spitz, Toto's trainer, who was also on set every day, who received that payment. And since Toto was basically the 5th main character of the film, I think that's fair compensation. Toto's a doggone hard-working dog.
Toto's real name was Terry, and he was a she. My name's Robert Riddell Weatherwax, and I'm a 3rd-generation dog trainer from the family that trained Toto.
That was one of the roles for which they did hold an audition, and they put it out to the public, actually. And so people from all over the country sent in pictures of their dogs.
Terry was a movie dog. Terry had experience prior to The Wizard of Oz.
We could only find some way of getting rid of the child. Heaven knows she's not wanted here.
Carl Spitz was the owner and trainer of Toto, but Jack Weatherwax filled in for Carl Spitz, and you can actually see Jack holding Toto in a couple of behind-the-scenes pictures.
If you look closely, you'll actually be able to see Toto looking for cues from Jack somewhere off stage.
While Terry was well cared for on set, like other actors, she didn't escape injury.
He did have a little bit of limp at a certain point from being stepped on by one of the castle guards. Terriers are tenacious by nature. You're kind of going to get that little Spitfire, that dog that thinks he's a lot bigger than he is.
After The Wizard of Oz wrapped, Terry's name was officially changed to Toto.
This is a memorial monument for Toto. Sadly, Toto passed away in 1945 and was interred on her owner's property in Studio City. Unfortunately, they paved over that entire property in 1958 to build the Ventura Freeway, under which Toto is resting, although no way that's in peace.
Ray Bolger had this incredible dance sequence choreographed by Busby Berkeley. And in that dance sequence, right after he says, "I could dance and be merry, life could be a ding-a-dairy," he goes off and does this beautiful soft shoe gymnastic dance number where he's leaping all over the set, bouncing off of rubber fence posts, and then flying into the air on wires, chasing after a crow who stole his straw, and then a giant pumpkin gets rolled down the hill by Toto. I mean, it is the most dynamic and beautiful dance number, and I love it. It was cut, unfortunately, for time. They really wanted to tighten up those scenes and have the movie really move. MGM wasn't confident that the audience would stand for this fantasy malarkey for that long, so they cut as much as they could, and unfortunately that was one of the ones that hit the cutting room floor.
It's very, very noticeable that there's some continuity errors.
It's brilliant.
Even if you're not really looking that hard, you can see in the film that Dorothy's braids change from like shorter, very curly up here to very, very long, like back and forth, back and forth.
Mostly in the scarecrow sequence.
In the,
That's
yeah,
like
that
the
whole
most
scarecrow
jarring.
sequence.
Dorothy's hair length changes a lot, and it was because of reshoots, and they just didn't get the length quite right. They had actually originally had it longer and then shortened it a bit, and so her braids are all over the place.
And then once they're starting to meet the Tin Man is when you can notice her shoes are changing. She goes from her ruby slippers to her rehearsal black shoes.
The trees are throwing their apples, and if you watch very closely after he gives them one of these and they throw the apple and they stumble backwards, you'll see her in her black shoes instead of her ruby slippers, and that's because they pinched her toes, and she took them off backstage as often as possible. In backstage photos, you'll see her wearing white fuzzy slippers or her brown booties. She preferred those to her ruby slippers.
I had, the last time we saw this massive revelation watching Wizard of Oz. Dorothy never introduces herself to the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion. Never says, "Hi, my name is Dorothy."
We haven't really met properly, have we?
Why, no.
How do you do?
How do you do?
Very well, thank you.
And Ray literally starts calling Judy Dorothy.
Come along, Dorothy.
So that like struck me as just like, I've never picked up on this.
That's a weird thing.
Another favorite continuity thing, two favorites, and these are witch things I love. The golden cap is seen.
Yeah, the golden cap is there.
By the Wicked Witch. This is a nod to the L. Frank Baum book. The golden cap would summons the winged monkeys with a really ridiculous chant that the witch would have to do. I wish. Yeah, like, it's so good. And she's supposed to like, didn't she like have to
There's
do like,
like
a
a
little
movement.
jig with it?
Yeah, there's a whole choreo.
Yes, and also like we never hear her speak Nico, which is the winged monkey's name. We never hear it spoken. It was supposed to be in these little scenes that were cut because she was too scary.
Other continuity errors include the Emerald City Guard's mustache pointing upward and then downward, a grease spot on Dorothy's dress,
Come on, we'll go tell Uncle Henry and Auntie Em.
and Munchkin's mysteriously changing positions.
My, people come and go so quickly here.
Follow the yellow brick road. Follow the yellow brick road.
When Dorothy begins her journey to the Emerald City, we see a red brick road intertwined with the yellow brick road. But where does the red brick road lead? Sharing the same spiral beginning in Munchkinland, the red brick road is never mentioned in the film, but appears to become a separate path. In recent years, this mysterious road has even become a popular internet meme. The closest thing to an official answer came in 2009, when an MGM licensed map revealed that the red brick road is simply the main street of the city, starting and ending there in Munchkinland.
The Tin Man scene, the If I Only Had a Heart scene, had a couple of special effects in it that are really impressive and hold up very well. You'll notice at one point he toots and a big white puff of smoke comes out, and it's such a simple effect. It's just compressed air and talcum powder. And I love watching Toto in that scene because Toto just goes the other way. He's like, nope, I'm out of here. But also the lean that he does in that scene, you would think there would be wires, but then he immediately runs off and does something else. So he's not attached to anything. He very quietly slips his feet into metal discs on the floor in the yellow brick road, and that holds his feet in place so he can do that really neat leaning effect. The Tin Man's oil can was filled with chocolate syrup. And it really does work. They did try oil originally, but it did not look right. It didn't read on film, so they changed it to chocolate syrup, chocolate sauce. briefly hear the voice of Adriana Castellati in If I Only Had a Heart. She's well known for being the voice of Snow White from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which premiered 2 years before The Wizard of Oz and was a huge runaway hit. And you can hear her singing, "Wherefore art thou, Romeo?"
Wherefore art thou, Romeo?
Judy was well known for getting the giggles, and Bert Lahr, as the Cowardly Lion, would blubber and whimper and carry on, and she just couldn't contain herself.
When Dad jumps out at Dorothy in the movie and she slaps him, he starts to cry. And she always broke up.
Shame on you!
What did you do that for?
Judy, you have to remember she's a lot younger than these
16,
men.
yeah.
She's a teenager. When I was 16, I'm still giggly in my 30s. Like, as a 16-year-old, so giggly, everything makes you laugh. And so his reaction just made her go into a fit of giggles, and she kept laughing and ruining the take.
So she was really being unprofessional, unfortunately, and time was being spent, and that was money.
Victor Fleming lost his patience. He took her aside. He didn't do it publicly in front of the others, but he took her aside. And he said, "Now, darling, this is serious." And he gave her a slap. And she collected herself, came back, did the scene. Almost.
What
she starts to break.
What you see in the film is there is a little smile from Judy where she does contain herself. Bert Lahr's tail on this fishing wire or whatever it was that provided the movement to it, he's crying and he goes to get his tail so he can dab his eyes, and he misses the first time. And
that's where she starts to break.
That's where she's like, I'm going to laugh again because he just missed his tail.
It's still in the movie. She starts to laugh and she puts the dog up in front of her face, but she's still actually smiling.
Victor apparently felt really bad about it.
He felt badly
and
afterwards.
Went up to her and was like, "You could hit me," and something
she was
along
like,
those
"Oh,
lines.
stop
And
it."
she's like, "No, I could give you a kiss," which makes me just go, "Oh, that's the 30s."
I know, it's hard
That's the 30s.
if you really look
that
at it.
training to kiss grandpa before you go to bed,
But
like that
after
kind
you
of
got
thing.
hit.
Judy never held a grudge. She had a serious crush, actually, on Victor Fleming.
She gave him a kiss on the nose. She forgave him, but it's been blown way out of proportion, and it's been magnified through the lens of presentism.
Now, Judy Garland, much like myself, was considered to be a little too fat to play the role of Dorothy. That did not require laughter from the audience. So supposedly, the studio put her on this really strict diet of black coffee, chicken soup, and 80 cigarettes a day. Now, I can only assume the chicken soup was to soothe the burning hole in her esophagus.
I don't know where this meme about Judy Garland being on the mayor diet of black coffee and 80 cigarettes a day, I don't know where this originated. It's ridiculous. We see it on a daily basis on the internet. There is no truth to it. There is no evidence that she was smoking cigarettes at that age. They might be referring to MGM's desire for Judy to slim down and lose weight. She was prescribed amphetamines to give her energy. She was assigned an athletic conditioner, and she also had to wear a corset to help to blur her figure and make her appear more childlike. Another myth is that she was working 10, 12, 18 hours a day. That didn't happen.
It couldn't have. It was against the law.
It was against the law. She was allowed to be at the studio for 8 hours a day. She was allowed 4 hours to film, 3 hours of school, 1 hour of what was called recreation. It's become very popular for people to sensationalize all of these behind-the-scenes stories about the making of The Wizard of Oz, when in fact there's no truth to them.
One of my dad's ad-libs was, unusual weather we're having, and it was in the poppy fields. And it was unusual weather when it was snowing.
Have you heard the rumor, and I know some of you have, that the snow that they used in the poppy scene was actually asbestos, which is not uncommon for the time because they actually mass marketed it as a Christmas decoration. And it was used in other movies like Holiday Inn and White Christmas. I guess it was just as best as we could do at the time.
There is some historical disagreement about the snow in the poppy field scene. There are some people who say it was asbestos, there are some people who say it was gypsum, and the ordering sheets for The Wizard of Oz make it kind of unclear because they did use asbestos for other things as well.
We interviewed Charles Schramm. Charles Schramm was a makeup artist at MGM, but it was also his responsibility to be on set every single day. It was probably the first time anyone had ever asked what was used for the snow.
Mr. Schramm
in
had a
the poppy
remarkable memory. I mean, in our opinion,
an extraordinary recall. And without hesitation,
very alert.
he said gypsum. He would have had to pick flakes of the gypsum out of Judy Garland's wig and out of the mane for Bert Lahr's lion wig.
Neither material is great. Regardless of whether or not it was asbestos, at the time, this is another case of they had no idea how dangerous asbestos actually was.
Once inside the Emerald City, the travelers are given a tour in a carriage drawn by the horse of a different color. With the assistance of Max Factor, the MGM makeup department had been assigned the task of pigmenting 2 steeds.
The horse goes from white to purple to red to yellow. There was also a shot that was removed where the horse also turns blue. It was not yellow.
It was the equivalent of what we would call cake icing dye or food coloring. The Jell-O was dreamed up by Jimmy Fidler, who was a Hollywood columnist, and I think it was probably a way of making it relatable to the typical American household.
But those working behind the scenes on MGM's production number 1060 bore witness to a catastrophe so upsetting that most of them would never speak of the experience.
They actually killed a horse on the set of The Wizard of Oz, and this is the first time anyone's stating this publicly. The real story is that they had never before attempted to pigment the hide of a living creature for Technicolor film. And they made an egregious oversight in not thinking that any living creature needs to breathe through its skin, not just its nostrils and its mouth. They painted a horse with house paint and it dropped dead. And at that point, the ASPCA got involved and they switched to something more thin and water-soluble through the use of food coloring.
There was a deleted scene where the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion arm themselves in preparation to go and get the broomstick from the Wicked Witch of the West. And if you notice in that scene, the Tin Man has a giant wrench, and the Lion has a net and a bottle of witch-removing spray, and the Scarecrow has a gun. Why they gave the brainless guy a gun? I don't know, bad decision. But you'll notice before the flying monkeys get there, those weapons are gone, and that's because they would have been disarmed during the jitterbug scene. Continuity error.
The Jitterbug was in fact the first song written for The Wizard of Oz, and it was written with Judy Garland, her style in mind. That jazzy element to it was what Judy thrived upon. It takes place in the film where they're going through the haunted forest and the Wicked Witch is about to send her winged monkeys out to deal with them.
The Jitterbug was an enchanted bug that the Wicked Witch was going to send out to make the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion and Dorothy dance till they drop. And you can hear her say, even in the finished film, I've sent a little insect on ahead to take the fight out of them.
I've sent a little insect on ahead to take the fight out of them.
That's what she was referring to. It was the Jitterbug. And that scene was ultimately cut. They spent $86,000 to rehearse and film that scene, a very expensive bug for one that did not show up in the finished film. But it's unfortunate that it wasn't there because it's such a fun number.
While the original footage of the Jitterbug sequence is believed to be long lost, composer Harold Arlen's home movies captured a rehearsal for the scene. which, after all these years, is the only glimpse we have into the sequence.
Hiding in the treetops, it's that rascal, the jitterbug.
Oh, that gives me chills. The trees are what gets me in this. They look terrifying, and you can
There's that
see
man in there.
you can see the man operating the tree, which is so fun.
They're like, okay, for dance partners, we're gonna have Judy and Ray and Bert and Jack.
Bert and Jack.
That's cute. It's the pauses and then
It
the
feels
sugars.
like a fever dream that we even have this.
Is it out there?
At the time that the Jitterbug was actually being written and filmed for The Wizard of Oz, there was already a dance craze called the Jitterbug.
There are some people who say it was cut because it would date the film. More likely, it was cut for time. They were really trying to tighten up the third act of the film. It's actually really funny that If I Were King of the Forest, which is about halfway through the movie, is the last song in the movie. The musical stops being a musical halfway through the musical. And they had planned to have the Jitterbug, a reprise of Over the Rainbow.
Someday I'll wake and rub my eyes, and in that land beyond the skies, you'll find me.
And there would have been a triumphant return to the Emerald City, which was a reprise of Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. It was called Hail, Hail, the Witch is Dead.
Hail, hail, the witch is dead. Witch, oh witch, the wicked witch. Hail, hail, the witch is dead.
All of those things were cut for a time because they really wanted the movie to pick up in that third act and get Dorothy home quickly. The winged monkey effect was a combination of little people on wires and puppets. They had little people in the costumes on piano wire, very thin piano wire that was often faulty, and a couple of people fell. And in the background, in the distance, they had small puppets.
There's a photograph of me in the movie theater. It's the moment where the monkeys take Dorothy to the witch's castle, and I go like that, and I'm just in horror, the 6-year-old girl, terrified.
When the monkey grabbed my mother, I thought they had kidnapped her in real life because I was so young I didn't know the difference between live and film. I started crying.
There's a couple of scenes where you can spot the stunt doubles. I think you can notice them really, really clearly on the mountain leading up to the Wicked Witch of the West's castle. You can definitely tell that's not Bert Lahr in that scene. But the most famous example of a stunt double being seen on set was Bobby Cochet when she steps in to the black and white Kansas and opens the door and leads to that magical world of Technicolor. You can also see Bobby Cochet falling into the pig pen for Judy Garland. She does a lovely twirl and then fall, but she does it in such a way you really, even stopping it in high definition, it's very hard to see that it's not Judy Garland. The chant that the Winky Guards say as they're marching, a lot of people have speculated what they're saying. What they're saying is, oh, we-yo, we-yo. It doesn't mean anything.
Oh, the internet. According to a special effects sheet from The Wizard of Oz, the sparking effect of the ruby slippers was achieved using, quote, electrical juice. The term juice referred to electrical current, which was filmed and then superimposed over the shot.
Somewhere, somehow, somebody misinterpreted it or took it literally that juice was juice.
Juice is an electrician's term.
Juice is an electrician's term.
So it was not apple juice. I don't even know how that could have been accomplished.
The internet has reported that
with
it was
apple juice.
Apple juice.
The term bounding did start in the Disney community. My friend Leslie Kay, she actually coined that phrase Disney bounding and started that whole community. It's not cosplay because it doesn't have to be literal. Bounding is just a color blocking option. So for example, if you wanted to be Mickey Mouse, he's black and wears red shorts and has yellow shoes. You just need to incorporate those 3 colors. They don't even have to be black, red, yellow. It could be like a yellow headband, red shirt, and black shorts. outfits. Ozbounding would be literally the same thing. I guess what I'm wearing right now would be an example of an Ozbound because it's not exactly a white blouse with a blue gingham jumper. It's the colors, it's the blue gingham, but it's a different style of shirt, and it's got white in it because of the bow. So this would be a simple version of a Ozbound, and then you could wear red shoes, doesn't even have to sparkle, so it's up to you.
In some ways, that's the simplest question. In some ways, it's the hardest.
It reminds people of happy times. I think it evokes happy memories for people. It's comforting.
That childlike wonder and the magic is what I always go back to.
I just always have had an identity with this magical land, and it just has gotten bigger and bigger, and I'm so grateful to it.
It was just so imaginative and like being in the middle of a fairy tale. Just what an adventure for me.
Even if you're watching it for the first time, there's something so familiar and comforting about the film and its style and everything that it encompasses.
Oz is ubiquitous in our culture. The quotations, the references.
Where the rainbow ends. We're not in Kansas anymore.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little soul, too.
It's this myth that is so familiar to us.
It's touched so many people and so many lives, and it's just one of those things that people can't forget.
The basic message of Oz is optimism, accepting differences, celebrating who we are, and finding the best in ourselves and others.
Who are we as human beings? Know thyself. In order to do that, you have to know your mind, you have to know what's in your heart, and you have to know what's in your gut. That is it, and that is the teaching of this movie.
When Dorothy reaches the end of the Yellow Brick Road, she understands what she really wants in life, and that's a journey we're all individually on.
No one in the story of The Wizard of Oz is without value. We are not told this often enough in our day-to-day lives, and it is one of the blessings of that story and one of the reasons we return to it. It's true that the scenes in which Margaret Hamilton are shown in The Wizard of Oz are only 12 minutes or 12 and a half minutes out of that 90-minute film.
And it isn't long, my pretty. It isn't long.
There apparently were more scenes shot, I've read, and there was more dialogue that she said, including some things that sounded like Hannibal Lecter. I mean, they were even scarier. There's apparently a line I read somewhere where she said to Dorothy, maybe in the castle, "You can't imagine what I'm going to do to you." And I mean, it was scary enough, but to think of worse things, being cooked up by the witch before Dorothy was rescued, that would have made, the nation of quivering, sniveling children become even more institutionalizable than it had been up to that point.
But the Wicked Witch of the West would gain a whole new life and significantly more screen time, thanks to what can only be described as supernatural inspiration.
I had just begun to think about a possible figure to use for my exploration about the nature of evil. Then she came to me, as in a vision. It was Margaret Hamilton, and she was coming down from the clouds, and she was saying, "I'll get you and your little dog." And I thought, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, I have had a vision.